In the dusty streets of desert Thistle Valley, an old man sits quietly on his wooden porch, his weathered hands trembling as he rocks in his chair. The local troublemakers mock him daily, unaware that those shaking hands once belonged to the most feared marksman in the Arizona territory. They're about to learn that some legends never fade, they just get older. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The scorching Arizona sun beat down on desert Thistle Valley, a small town nestled between towering red cliffs and endless stretches of desert sage. Every morning, like clockwork, Ezra McCready would settle into his creaking rocking chair on the front porch of his modest home. His silver hair gleamed in the morning light, and his worn boots showed the miles they'd traveled. To passers-by, he was just another old-timer living out his twilight years, watching the world go by through tired eyes. Most folks in town knew him as the quiet man who'd drift into Martha Williams' saloon every Thursday for a bowl of stew and a glass of water. He never touched whiskey anymore, though nobody knew why. The children would sometimes stop by his porch for the hard candies he kept in his pocket, and he'd tell them stories about the desert, which plants could heal, which could harm, and how to read the weather in the clouds. Young Jimmy Foster, a bright-eyed 12-year-old with a fascination for the Old West, was particularly fond of the elderly man. He'd sit cross-legged on the porch steps, listening to Ezra's soft-spoken tales about the land. What Jimmy didn't know, what nobody in town knew, was that the gentleness in Ezra's voice masked decades of stories that would make even the bravest men shudder. The peace of desert. Thistle Valley was shattered the day Wade the Snake Harrison and his gang rode into town. They were the kind of men who mistook kindness for weakness, the sort who'd rather take than earn. Wade, with his silver-studded gun belt and expensive black hat, carried himself like he owned every inch of ground he stood on. His right-hand man, Jasper Thorne, was a powder keg of temper with tobacco-stained teeth and quick hands. The youngest of their trio, Timothy Brown, was barely into his 20s, trying to prove himself with every breath he took. It didn't take long for them to notice the old man on the porch. To them, he was the perfect target, someone who couldn't fight back, someone who'd lived long enough to gather a few valuables worth taking. They didn't know about the carefully oiled Colt period, 45 hidden beneath the blanket across his lap, or the fact that his trembling hand steadied the moment he wrapped them around a gun grip. The first confrontation came on a Tuesday morning. Wade and his boys had spent the night drinking in Martha's saloon, and their mood was sour from losing at cards. They stopped in front of Ezra's porch, the dust from their boots settling on his freshly swept boards. "Well, look what we have here," Wade drawled, spitting tobacco juice near Ezra's feet. "The town's official sidewalk warmer. Must be real important work you're doing there, old-timer." Ezra's eyes, still sharp despite his years, took in every detail. The way Wade's gun hung slightly low on his right hip, how Jasper's left boot had a loose spur, and how young Timothy's trigger finger twitched nervously. He said nothing, just kept rocking. "Are you deaf as well as old?" Jasper stepped closer, his spurs jingling discordantly. "The boss is talking to you." "I hear just fine," Ezra replied softly, his voice carrying the gentle rasp of age. "And I see just fine, too. I see 3 men who ought to be moving along." Timothy laughed, a harsh sound trying to match his companion's cruelty. "Or what, Grandpa? You'll bore us to death with stories about the good old days?" Sheriff Thomas Palmer watched the scene unfold from across the street, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. He knew Ezra's history, one of the few who did, and he saw the almost imperceptible change in the old man's posture. It was subtle, the way a rattlesnake's warning is subtle to those who don't know what to look for. Martha Williams stepped out of her saloon, wiping her hands on her apron. She'd known Ezra for years, and had seen the old newspaper clippings he kept folded in his Bible. She knew what those trembling hands had done in their prime. "Boys," she called out, "your breakfast is getting cold." Wade turned, annoyance flickering across his face. "We'll be there when we're good and ready, woman." But he stepped back from the porch anyway, making a show of adjusting his gun belt. "We'll continue this conversation later, old man. Maybe see what kinds of treasures you've got tucked away in that little house of yours." As they swaggered away, young Jimmy Foster emerged from behind a water barrel where he'd been watching. "Mr. McCready," he whispered, climbing onto the porch. "Why'd you let them talk to you like that?" Ezra's eyes, the color of faded denim, crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "Jimmy, my boy, there's something you need to learn about this world. Sometimes the smartest thing a man can do is let others think they're stronger than him. But remember this, it's not about who makes the most noise, it's about who knows when to make their move." He reached into his pocket for a piece of candy, but his hand brushed against something else, an old tin star, its silver surface dulled with age, the words Arizona Rangers still barely visible beneath the tarnish. He let it lie there, a reminder of days long past, days that might not stay in the past much longer. The following days in Desert Thistle Valley carried a weight of anticipation, like the heavy air before a storm. Wade Harrison and his gang had made themselves at home in Martha's saloon, turning the once peaceful establishment into their personal kingdom. They'd push tables over for fun, harass the customers, and Martha